All right, good evening. It is 7:04 p.m. I will call to order this meeting of the Planning Commission. If you're willing and able, please stand and join us for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Madam Clerk is not in here yet. Is there somebody else that could do a roll call? Okay. Could I get a roll call from you, Mr. Colson, please?
Sure. Rice Greer,
Present.
Sharon Abram,
Present.
Tim Hillman,
Present.
Dennis Nordma,
Present.
and the other three have excused absences.
I will seek a motion to approve the absences of Commissioner Hammond, Commissioner Clark, and Commissioner Robinson.
So moved.
Support.
That's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we will approve the absences of Commissioners Hammond, Robinson, and Clark. Agenda item 4, approval of the agenda. Does everybody have the agenda in front of them?
Where do I get a copy again?
Oh, I can go.
Thank you, I'm sorry. Appreciate you both.
I'll take a motion to approve the agenda, please.
I move to approve the agenda.
I'll take a second, please.
Support.
The motion to approve the agenda has been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Hearing none, we'll approve the agenda. Agenda item 5, approval of meeting minutes. The April meeting minutes, you might remember, weren't available to us at our May meeting, but now they are. So I'll take a motion to approve our April and May meeting minutes, please.
I so move.
Support.
There's been a motion and a second. All in favor? All
Aye.
opposed? Hearing none, we'll approve the April and May meeting minutes. We do have 2 sections for public comment. Neither are designated for agenda items, but if you'd like, please rise to the podium, state your name, and offer your 3-minute public comment.
I'll make this, John Suzanis, Rainbow Drive. Just one comment for future consideration. I applaud everybody's desire to serve the community by being a member of a committee, or in this case on the commission. And I understand that excusing absences is because the reason for being absent is a good one. And I appreciate all of that. But I do wonder if there shouldn't be a minimum amount of participation required, not excused and unexcused, but even even excused, in order just to get commission work done, not as a punishment or anything like that. Or if members who can't make it regularly should be asked whether or not they want to continue. Again, not in any way a reprimand, just an acknowledgement of the fact that it takes a lot of work to get committee work done, to get commission work done, and perhaps they could volunteer in another capacity if they can't make these meetings.
Thank you. Any other comment? All right, seeing none, we will move down to agenda item 7, new business. We have here with us today reps from Giffords-Webster, Eric and Hannah. Should I turn it over to you,
Yeah,
Austin, for a kickoff? Or okay.
Yeah, we're going to invite Hannah and Eric to come on up. And as we've been going through this process, we've had surveys up online that members of the public and residents could complete. So they've been open for 3 months?
Just about, yeah.
Yeah, 3 months. So tonight, it's been long awaited. We actually get to see those results. So they're going to start going over them. And this is going to be an introductory to it, and it's going to be a lot of information. So don't try to worry about getting a deep a deep understanding of it at this point, just work your way through it and be open to it, listen to it, respond to it, and make sure to voice your opinion as you're going through it with Hannah and Eric. And there'll be more to come as this process goes forward. So I'll
Thank
hand
you.
it over to Eric and Hannah.
Before we tag out real fast, Elisa, the first two matters were supported by Sharon? Oh, you got them? Okay, cool.
I'm sorry, that was about our election. I had to handle something about our election, but did we start right at 7?
7:06.
7:04, I thought.
7:04?
7:04? Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, everyone. Nice teamwork, appreciate it.
Thank you. Austin described the survey results as long awaited. I would agree with that. I would also say they are long. So I would appreciate it tonight if we could, rather than get too deep into the details, specifics, weeds, so to speak, if we could concentrate our discussion on generally observed themes, recurring themes from the survey results. I think that would be most effective. I worry if we get too into the details, we might be focusing too intently on singular responses to the survey. That's why I think a more general kind of thematic discussion is probably best for tonight.
I agree.
Oh, yeah, one moment. I didn't use it today, so I didn't.
That's okay. Sorry, thank you for bearing with us. We
That's
just
okay.
would like you all to be able to see the results visibly on the screen, if possible.
You mentioned in the study session that we'd focus more closely on the broad themes that aren't parks and recreation. Maybe to start, you could let us know which order we intend to go in.
Yes, absolutely. We'll get a little bit more into the structure of things, so thank you for starting with that, because I think that'll be helpful as we go along.
Sure.
And to anyone in the audience tonight, please let us know if you can't hear us. Feel free to shout or do whatever. I'm happy to get louder. Just connecting up here a moment. Thank you for being patient. Usually it works after that. There we go. All right, so just to kind of start off here, we've been bringing back this timeline, and it's been improved and evolving over time, but just to recap, we went through this data collection phase. It was really listening, hearing from the public phase from February all the way until the end of May. We had 4 different surveys open. And those closed right at the end of May. So now we're really moving into the goals and objectives phase. This is where the Planning Commission now has all of this feedback to work with. They've listened and heard a lot of different conversations and stories from people who have lived here over the last 4 months, and now you can take those things and turn them into more specific goals and words as we move into this comprehensive plan process. And just to get the total numbers out there for all 4 surveys, we now have they are closed. So the housing survey, we heard from 243 residents. The transportation survey, we heard from 77 people. Economic development, we got 60 responses. And then parks and recreation, there were 59 responses. One important note that we have on the screen is that because these were separate surveys, residents could take more than one, and I'm sure some of you have. So these totals are not necessarily to be added together to mean like unique responses. And so we just want to make it aware we're cognizant of that when we're going through this data analysis piece. And actually, before we get into some of the data, we wanted to focus the conversation tonight on the topical questions. So we did ask a lot of demographic questions up front in each survey. Each survey had the same set of demographic questions, but cross-analyzing those demographic questions, like did certain people answer one way or another, is a deeper analysis and kind of a separate conversation to look at after. Who did we reach, who did we not reach? So we want to focus on what did we actually hear in the topical questions tonight and kind of use that to guide the goals. As Austin said, this is just our first dive into some of this stuff, so we'll have more conversations going forward, but those questions aren't necessarily omitted, they're kind of just being saved as a conversation for later. But the full results are available right now to the public, so you can absolutely look at those things and see what was answered. We're just gonna focus on those topical questions. So if you're following along, it's gonna start on like question 6 or 7. Does anybody have any questions about that process before we move on? Perfect. And just to keep things kind of moving and succinct. So with that, I'm gonna hand it off to Eric, and he's gonna talk about housing. Yeah, we'll have to move. Sorry, we have to share.
Okay. So as we've discussed, and we're all aware, we know what the goals are for the current master plan. And as we've discussed as a planning commission body, the idea is that if those goals that we've aspired to are generally in line with what we envision for the community, it seems like the consensus is that those goals should be more specific, obviously, so that we can have measurable and obtainable objectives that can be achieved. So going through the housing survey, this is just an analysis of the responses from the community, which opens up a whole new realm of possibilities and how we might want to tackle that, because not everyone's going to, respond the same way, obviously. So this current slide here reads, the current comprehensive plan of 2021, the goal on housing aspires to have attractive, safe, quiet, and well-maintained neighborhoods, a diversified range of housing for people of all ages and abilities, and active neighborhoods that promote community connectedness. How well do you think the city is doing at achieving this goal? And what is it, out of 4? The response was 3.54, so quite high.
And I will add just a little bit of additional context. The 4 was very well, and generally like 0 is very poor. So with all of these weighted average result questions, generally above a 3, it received positive scoring. Below a 3, that would be negative scoring. And I can repeat that throughout the process, but this one received positive scoring. So in general, the public indicated that they felt this goal was, that the city was doing okay at achieving this goal as it was written in the 2021 master plan.
Which seems to align with, someone who's reviewing and analyzing the data. It aligns with what respondents feel is a positive for the community, and that emphasizes a lot on the neighborhoods. And so the master plan should uphold that vision for high-quality neighborhoods beyond just the commercial corridors. Back up? Oh. I guess the mouse. You frozen? There we go. Okay. The 2021 master plan included 2 zoning-related action items to address its housing goal. Please share your thoughts on the level of importance of each action item below. And the 2 action items are review the zoning ordinance to ensure standards support a variety of housing options for young adults, families, and older adults. And this scored a value of 3.67. And so I think this sheds some light on enhancing the housing diversity within the community. Whether or not that's something that we want to pursue, that the city wants to pursue, having that feedback helps us better understand an appetite for potentially exploring ways in which we can diversify the housing stock in the community. And then the second one is to ensure the zoning ordinance allows appropriate residential retrofits for accessibility in order to help seniors remain in their homes. And this one scored much higher at 4.27, so I think that that speaks pretty loudly to what we heard about Parks and Recreation in terms of addressing the aging community and how Parks and Recreation amenities can coexist and coincide with housing amenities that are more apt to ADA compliance or just more accessibility in general for a focus on seniors remaining in their homes.
If I may, on that topic, common theme I saw in the data, especially in the written responses, which I paid more attention to the kind of written responses than I did to the multiple choice style options. Whereas I do think most of what I was reading had an emphasis on like preserving and maintaining the housing stock we already have. There was a bit, at least, of discussion about the support of additional housing options, caveated, at least for my read on it, by additional housings, particularly options, particularly for seniors hoping to age in place. So that my read on the data jibes with this summary.
And thank you for adding that context, if I may. I will say that we chose not to include the open response in this digest of the surveys as well, but commissioners feel free to add additional context like that from the open response. Sometimes that is helpful.
Sure. Sounds like we have some more.
Yes, I think the lower score on the first bar is in part related to people not agreeing on the goal. And if that's the question, you could say, how well are we doing? Or do you like what we're doing? And there are different types of answers. Some people want more variety. Some people want opportunities for young people to buy in to this community at a more middle or low end level and work their way up in the housing. And some people don't want to see that. Some people want senior housing, apartment housing, but other people don't want it for other people. So we've got some real contradictory responses to work our way through.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And when we see the results of these topics, that it would point towards the written responses from the survey to see if there can be any correlation between what it's saying in the graph versus what types of verbal or written responses the results of the survey would have there to make the connections with that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I agree that when the questions are multiple choice, depending on the place from which you're reading the question, two people with actually opposite views may answer in a similar way. Right. That's why I found the kind of editorial section of the data to kind of provide color or clarification about what the respondents to the multiple choice sections of the surveys were actually saying.
Yeah, what the motivator is, or key terms. Yeah.
If I may add to that as well, I think to Commissioner Nordmo's point that in aggregate, we don't know if necessarily two people just felt kind of in the middle about it, or one person is all the way on one end and one person is on the other end. So if it would be useful to the commission, and I think it may very well be, to receive kind of the full each numbered response, but we'd have to go through and just kind of anonymize those because they're typically attached to like a respondent ID. It's not like a personal information that's collected, but if that's something that would interest the commission, we can certainly do that. It would just take a little more time.
Well, we do have in our agenda packet a quite comprehensive outline of the data. So my recommendation would be if people want that drilled down even further to let that be known via an email, and I can make sure that it gets over to you.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
I just have a question. If there isn't really an obvious consensus among the survey results about what matters, is that a thing then to avoid in addressing in the master plan, since we can't basically articulate a community consensus? Or what usually is the way that's handled?
Yeah, do you want?
If you,
So that's a really good question. And I think we would just do our best to analyze the data that's before us here in graphic format versus the types of responses that we get from the written responses. And so both have to be weighed into the thought process equally. And so that's the importance of having the Planning Commission take all of that into consideration. And then, you know, of course, having the open house to have more feedback from the residents. So if we put this, let's say, into a goal that's established one way, that's presented at the open house, and that we get the feedback from it that says, well, we disagree, or, you know, it seems as though that's a misrepresentation of what's truly intended, then we can still have that opportunity to make, you know, adjustments that are more reflective of what the true intention of the.
So if
what
you
the
take,
question
for
is.
example, the idea we want more diverse housing or something like that, and we see people either really like that or really didn't like it. It's an extremely polarizing idea. Is that just then a thing, again, is that a thing we should be avoiding when we articulate our value statements?
Not
Or
necessarily.
is, how do people handle that kind of very polarizing issue in a document like this?
I think that, if I may, so depending on what the exact nature of it is, let's say it is diversified housing, you can drill down with more questions, right? So you can ask, sometimes it's more useful to focus on the housing need than housing type. So you'll notice some of the questions include things like, do we want to focus on first-time home buyers or second-time home buyers? What that could mean many different things to many different people, but you might find more consensus among people if you ask questions that way. So you can drill down and actually ask people, well, I don't want diversified housing, but I do want housing for second-time or move-up buyers. And then you can continue that conversation as a planning commission because you've seen a lot of passion in that area. So, you know, if you're getting a polarizing view, it's not necessarily something to avoid. In fact, I would actually take a closer look at it and figure out, well, what is it that people actually believe? Because the question may not give you the full story. And I think to Eric's point and Commissioner Hillman, that written context kind of gives you more of an idea. Does that answer your question a little further?
So your recommendation would be to try to discover more during the open house, or like when?
So potentially, yeah, if you're seeing things that are cropping up where maybe there's a lot of polarization, something off the top of my head that I can think of would be the boulevard along Southfield Road that had pretty split public opinion and a lot of unsure public opinion. So you might take a look at that and say, we need to either provide the public more information on this, or we need to gain more information from the public. And if there is truly a divide and it's not something that you feel that there's a clear one way or the other, you can always make action items to explore it more. You know, you don't have to necessarily decide how you're going to go. The master plan, it's, you know, you can plan to research these things. So.
Okay, you answered my question, thanks.
Perfect.
I would say, just to wrap this bit of the conversation up, at some point, there may be items on which there is not clear consensus among survey result folks or people at the open house or people in this public comment session, et cetera. And so regardless of whether or not that consensus exists, we as individual commissioners and we as the body are possibly going to have to make some good faith, kind of subjective choices about what ultimately appears and doesn't, based on our own read of the room, our own read of the data, and, you know, to your point about the boulevard idea, that particular boulevard idea might come down to being something as very polarized, but perhaps other responses about emphasis on green space or trees or natural elements from a different section of the survey may color your position to say, hey, perhaps we should be emphasizing this in the master plan based on other responses. So I would encourage us to remember that we are also charged with ultimately making some decisions. And how we get there is, I think, an individual choice as much as it is a choice of this body, as much as it is a interpretation of the feedback we're getting from various directions.
Yeah, and it's the feedback that's key, I think, too, is to be able to make those decisions, but based on what? And I think of utmost importance is the feedback from the community and the residents. Yep. So all great conversation. Which of the following do you think are likely reasons why people would choose to move to or stay in Lathrup Village? Interestingly enough, the top response is to restore a historic home. So again, that goes to the value that's seen in the residential neighborhoods of the community. It also speaks to the historic or the age of the home, the housing stock within the community, but it's valued. And so, not everyone's looking for that, but those who are, both residents of the village or the city and those who are looking, if a historic home is their thing, then certainly that's something that Lathrup Village can triumph or uphold as an asset to the community. So other top performing items were to live closer to employment or school. That speaks, or at least to my understanding, as being a centrally located city within the region with easy access to employment and schools. To live somewhere walkable, that's something we're always working on. And we have the transportation topic that we can discuss a little bit later. To live in a larger home. I think Lathrup Village is diverse in the sense that it has, some smaller homes as well as larger homes, obviously a bit older. But again, the results of this survey speak to what people would specifically be looking at in terms of the assets of living in a Lathrup Village home. Do you anticipate moving in the next 5 years? Respondents, about 20% said yes, and 76% said no. So I guess what would trigger further conversation or insight would be, well, those that are here will stay here, 76%, but what would be the reason for those who move? Would it be for school options, for work opportunities, but to try and get to the bottom of the reasons why residents would move within the next 5 years. If you are thinking of moving in the next 5 years, do you think you could find housing that meets your preference in your price range in Lathrup Village? Pretty even keel answers. There's housing that meets my preference, 15%. There's housing available that meets my preference but is outside my price range, 11%. And there's not housing that meets my preferences. So again, I think trying to take some hints from the written responses as we look at these percentages would hopefully give us some insight as to what motivates people for either staying or leaving their home.
Based on some of the written responses, based on the written responses as I read through them, I noticed an emphasis on concerns over property taxes, school quality, beyond emphasis on the affordability of the housing stock itself. So that was interesting to me. It sounds like people are valuing the housing stock and are articulating their appreciation for its distinctive character and architectural integrity and historic nature, but their concerns seem more, municipal in nature than they do neighborhoodly in nature, if that makes sense. So
Yeah.
that's why I think the commentary section can provide a lot of color and elaboration on beyond the stuff that's measurable with percentages and
Yeah.
graphs.
Yeah, that's a really good point, and I think, to the point of taxes, I think there was even one response that made mention that, as much as they'd like to enhance or maintain or upgrade their home, it's the taxing structure that may hinder those types of efforts. And so it's just interesting to see that there's always that challenge that as desirable as a community is, you still have the bottom line of residents' pockets, whether or not they're able to afford the unique type of housing that's well established within the community.
There are people who want to move up into nicer homes, and there are people that want to move into a smaller, more affordable environment, and they want us to provide it as they age. So again, we're tugged in two directions. Similarly, on schools, some people say we need to improve the schools. If we improve the schools, housing values will go up, so will taxes. If we don't improve the schools, we're being very cynical, particularly if we're avoiding investment in schools to keep our taxes low. And some people are saying that's why I moved in, because my children are raised now and I need to move into a lower tax environment.
Mm.
And it's a lower tax environment because the schools aren't that great, or perceived to be that great. In some cases they really are, but we're talking about perceptions there.
Any other commentary?
We have to decide where to come down on that.
That's right.
It's a quality of life analysis, too. Okay, moving on with the housing survey. Almost 26% of Lathrup Village residents are over 65 years of age, compared to 17% of the residents of Oakland County. The question is, do you think the city of Lathrup Village has enough housing options to allow seniors to age in the community and stay in the city as long? Yes is about 30.85%, no, 38%, and unsure, 30%. So this might be a little bit tricky to tackle. Just as much say yes as those that say no. What is the true determining factor then? And so I think we may have to take a little bit deeper of a dive to understand why those that responded yes say that there's enough housing options to allow seniors to live in place. And maybe it's just out of, convenience of staying in your home because it's right-sized. But for those who answered no, perhaps it's because they want to downsize but stay in the community. And there's just not the housing type, smaller footprints that would allow for that. Or maybe they're two-story homes and it's, more efficient to live in a one-story flat, for example. So that's taking into account the different types of housing that would allow for or encourage those who have said no, to try and understand better why they responded no. And so again, maybe we can find some direction with that within the written responses.
And if I may, to add additional context, so for example, as the Planning Commission, if you are seeing these things where there's maybe an interest of senior housing, right? There were nearly 40% of respondents felt that there weren't. You could choose to, in the master plan, develop an action item for a senior housing survey or something that dives deeper into that based off of these survey results, just to kind of follow through on that context, if you feel like you need more information.
Sure, that's a good suggestion.
Okay, about 20% of the households in Lathrup Village have at least one child compared to 27% in Oakland County. Do you think the city of Lathrup Village has enough housing options to allow first-time home buyers or young families to enter the community? And 53% said yes, 27% said no, and 19% are unsure. So again, it's just trying to figure out a balance between those of differing opinions within this question. I don't know if the Planning Commission has any thoughts.
I know we're not getting into the demographics and we're just looking at the topical results, but I know from looking at the demographic data that the largest represented population in the data are older residents. And so who is saying yes and who is saying no based on age, I think would provide some color to this. For example, if a whole bunch of young people are saying no, I would probably give that greater consideration than people who aren't young deciding what younger people can afford or cannot afford. So perhaps some kind of deeper analysis of who is saying what might provide additional color.
You have the same problem in reverse for more senior people.
Sure.
Would you encourage or discourage the following types of residential development in Lathrup Village in the future? The one that scored the highest is housing for move-up or second-time home buyers. So again, it's just carrying on this conversation of, what type of housing do we have in the community versus what types of housing don't we have in the community? And to what extent can different levels of home purchasing be looked at as positive and negative in terms of the inventory that the city has available? What is the orange? Short-term rentals.
Yeah, short-term rentals and manufactured homes.
I know, but why are they orange? Do we have-
Lowest score.
The lowest scores, okay. Yeah, the lowest scores then being short-term rentals and manufactured homes. Detached condos, senior housing, those can kind of, coexist to a certain extent. Less maintenance with condominiums, senior housing and assisted living. Accessory dwelling units, also known as probably granny flats or secondary dwelling units. Those are becoming more popular, nationwide. But if that was the direction that the master plan may want to go, I think it'd take a lot more analysis and, just measuring the data in regards to secondary dwelling units on single-family lots. We talked about lot coverage and impervious surfaces, so there'd be a lot more thought put into something like that, I think. But senior housing, quadplexes and triplexes or townhouses, more smaller footprints that, those don't necessarily have to mean entry-level housing, but it could certainly include that as well. So just to keep and maintain or expand upon the diversity of housing would be characteristic of this slide. Were there any thoughts on that?
Did you literally ask the question as stated?
It was, right?
Would you encourage or discourage the following types of residential
Yeah,
development?
is that how you asked the question?
Yes.
Well, then,
Yes.
Yes, I would discourage it. Yes, I would encourage it. People would answer yes on both sides.
So this one was formatted as more of like a slider, like either you would strongly discourage or
Well, how does that
strongly
negative
encourage.
show here?
So it's not necessarily that there would be a negative, it's just that the lowest score someone could provide was 0. So if you strongly discourage it, it receives a completely 0 score. If you strongly encourage it, it receives a 5. I think
Okay,
that hopefully answers what you're getting at.
Okay, so you really had more qualifications on the question and the answer than are here.
I mean, so what you're seeing is the weighted average, for example.
Weighted average of yes, encourage.
So each option that you can choose is assigned a number, and that's detailed in the detailed report. But basically, if you are saying you strongly discourage something, that receives a 0. The mildly discourage is like a 1, and
Okay,
then
I get that. Now, the red and the black and the green, what does that mean?
yeah, so the reds are just to highlight the top 2 lowest scores. So the top 2 lowest scoring, meaning the most highly discouraged housing development types from respondents in the survey would be short-term rentals and manufactured homes. And then the darker green is just to visually emphasize your top 2 encouraged housing types, which was housing focusing on first-time home buyers and move up or second time home buyers, and everything else falls a little bit in between. But generally, you can see some interesting things in here, like your accessory dwelling units scored kind of high. So looking towards that master plan objective action item, you could look into or research that. Does that answer or clarify some of the data questions?
So what I'm getting from then is there's an emphasis on aggressively providing housing for either first-time or move-up, second-time home buyers, or seniors. 351's very close to that. Okay, we're getting to understand it a little better.
I do want to advocate, if you haven't yet looked through the data comprehensively, and I also realize it's impossible to answer the perfect question. That perfect question does not exist, but some of the more elaborated responses provide me color when looking at this, because a more thematic takeaway I got, and I know I already said this, but I'll repeat it, was an emphasis on not really tinkering with the housing stock too much. It seemed like the average responder was happy with the stock we have, and was focused more on preservation and maintenance than it was the addition of new housing. So I don't know that a lot of residents are saying, let's build more housing for first-time home buyers. They could very possibly be answering this as, if we're going to build something new, what would I prefer it to be over something else? And so I think some of the elaborated responses can help provide some color here.
I
Or it
also,
could-
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, or it could be realizing that Lathrup is pretty landlocked. So this isn't even a valid question. Zero. I mean, you could interpret it many different ways.
It could be interpreted for what fits, right? So there is no room for these types of homes, so I guess if we're going to build something new, let's concentrate on something that might be smaller, i.e. available to a first-time home buyer. So again, I want to put a lot of emphasis on the elaborated responses, because I think it can start filling in some of those gaps.
Yeah.
I also saw in the more verbal responses some confusion about some of the things that we have considered over the last year or have talked about, as though those were options right in the middle of the existing residential neighborhoods.
Sure.
Where no one has even brought up the idea of putting an apartment house in the middle of a residential block, or a condo, or a townhome. The only thing that comes up, and it's come up in some of the comments, is some people want the option for the mother-in-law suite, separate detached housing on the existing lot. That I would think would be very controversial given the other responses. But when people hear discussion of, well, for example, the apartment development, as though it could be next door to their house. If it's there on Southfield, then it could be on my block. Ain't gonna happen. I mean, that's not part of the plan. So we need to be clear when we set goals for diverse housing, where it would fit
Sure.
into the community pattern.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good point. Falling back on what I've heard so far was to recognize the assets currently that the neighborhoods are, the single-family residential neighborhoods, and that the master plan should be written in a way that protects those neighborhoods
Sure.
from any drastic change. And the Planning Commission has the full capacity to ensure that the master
Sure.
plan is written that way.
I mean, to reiterate these points, I put in kind of my key takeaways this sentence: residents do not appear to be seeking large-scale transformation of established neighborhoods.
Yep.
I think that is very clear from the responses we gathered.
Yeah.
And if I can just add, in many of these cases too, it's a if you don't ask, you don't know kind of a situation. So like you brought up, the way the question is worded is like, if we had development, but but you wouldn't know. I mean, if maybe the responses could surprise you and somebody
Yeah.
the neighborhood could respond totally differently. But, I think the way people have reacted is obviously keep things the same. But we don't necessarily include these questions to be inflammatory. It's more just to see which side of the pendulum people swing on to.
Sure.
All right, moving on. The 2021 goal on housing states that attractive, safe, quiet, and well-maintained neighborhoods, a diversified range of housing for people of all ages and abilities, and active neighborhoods that promote community connectedness. So I think it's well recognized what the assets are of living in Lathrup Village, especially within the single-family neighborhood component. But if there is any way to explore housing needs or shortages, or just any concerns as it relates to housing, what does that look like? Does it look like more housing in mixed-use areas of Southfield Road, for example, or how we could potentially implement that up on 12 Mile Road and not necessarily have that influence or impact negatively within the residential neighborhood? So it's just taking that current goal on housing and modifying it. I know we want to get more specific, and so that's taking this goal currently and enhancing it to the point that we could have it at the open house for further input from the community is kind of what we're thinking is the best approach here. So be happy to discuss more what your thoughts are on this particular goal.
I also saw a lot of references to the issue of connectedness, that people feel that that's a deficit in the community right now. It's not bringing people together a lot.
So that be a strategy of housing, transportation, maybe a little bit of both.
Parks and Rec.
Parks and Rec, for sure.
But I think what I'm hearing too is, so you're saying that you feel that this connectedness wording or phrasing should remain in the goal, even if it may or may not be written as it is now, but just identifying that that was a component that you think is relevant still?
Sure.
Okay.
I think we see in the survey results, and I've heard it time and time again in these chambers, an emphasis on distinctive residential character, high quality architecture, historic quality, all of which is absent from this. So I really think it ought to have some Lathrop Village specific kind of flavor to it. I also think, and this goes back to what Commissioner Nordmo was just talking about, we've had a lot of conversation about appropriate residential reinvestment along the commercial corridors. I think that is a highly more specific goal to put in the plan than what's currently there. And also makes clear that we're not talking about development in the established neighborhoods. I'll say one more thing. When I was describing what I believe to be and what I think many of these residents believe to be the Lathrop Village flavor, beyond the architectural part of it, I think there's a strong emphasis on peace, privacy, quiet residential life. And I don't see that here either.
So are we looking to further expand the goal with some of these specifics that are being suggested? How do you do that and still be concise or not lose?
Right, so we can always draft an enhanced goal, and that can be relayed to the Planning Commission prior to the open house, so that there can be some sort of agreement, of what that looks like prior to it being established for the public to comment on. So again, it's a work in progress right now. We have what it says, but we also we know it wants to get more specific, but just to understand what that looks like.
And we have this opportunity to offer that feedback verbally, but we also have this form, which was provided to us in electronic form as well. I recommend that approach. I found it easier to type than scribble on this paper to contribute to Giffords so that they can bake that into a kind of synthesized version of these ideas spoken out loud tonight and also written down at your leisure.
Yeah, that's a good point, and it would be preferred if you would to take that form and just jot down kind of what we're talking about tonight or expand upon that with your personal thoughts and beliefs, and then have that sent to us or sent to Austin, and he can forward it to us so that we can prepare for the open house in July.
What email
Yeah.
address should we use when we send it to you?
Send it to Tom Kennedy.
What's his
Per-
email address?
Perhaps to make this even easier, perhaps after the meeting tonight, either you, Tom, or you, Austin, could send the commission an email asking for responses back to it. Would that work? Yeah. So you'll just be replying to an email that's inbound
Yeah,
to
I get
you.
that part. What I was trying to get to in the question was, how are you gonna concisely put all of these new ideas into something that's already a pretty lengthy worded document? So just some curiosity about getting to a revision, and then we'll have an open house, and there still could be some thoughts there, so.
It just comes down to, sitting down with all the feedback from you on those forms, and, pulling out the common
Put it
themes.
together.
And just putting it together, stitching it together, and, hopefully not, but, we could be way off, and if we send it back and you have some feedback that says otherwise, then we would just go back to the drawing board to craft it in the way that's acceptable to the planning commission.
So you're our aggregator, synthesizer, copy editor,
That's right.
et cetera. Okay.
Conciseness is definitely the challenge, I'd say too, but we want it to be transparent as well. If we can send everybody's responses so it's clear where we got what from potentially, they can be anonymized. And if you have a different take on it, it's back and forth, so.
All right, is the next topic?
This is community character as well. We also included this goal together with housing because they're similar. They're both related to housing. Community character expands a little bit to more of the economic development and downtown side of things. But the way that the current 2021 master plan is written, community character does talk a lot about the residential neighborhoods. But I think one of the components in this goal that you have existing right now is that mixed use, multiple story, walkable downtown. So based off of what you guys have heard for housing, I don't know if you have any commentary on whether you think that that might still be relevant as it relates to economic development as well. But in the current master plan, it's written right before the housing chapter. So, and that could be a point of discussion as well.
I submitted my form already, so you'll see my more elaborated opinion on this goal as it was defined in 2021. I think it says far too little about our residential neighborhoods. That just takes up less real estate in the sentence as written than I think it should merit. I believe personally, and I think what I saw over and over again in the survey results and have heard many times in this room, is that the average Lathrup Village resident is less concerned about our mixed-use districts, for example, and are far more focused on the residential character of the city. So in totality, I think the commercial corridors really serve to benefit the neighborhoods. And if we're defining the community at large, I think this statement should be more in line with that.
Do you think that it helpful to have everything in one sentence?
No.
I don't, I very much think that is not helpful. That we should talk about the residential neighborhood, and then we should talk about the mixed-use transitional properties along the main roadways separately, and what challenges that presents for our tax base, for our city image, and for protecting the residential character. We can't have them half vacant because we just want professional offices there. It's not working.
Yeah.
And that conflicts with people wanting lower taxes. They want more services and lower taxes. Great, don't we all? But we need more taxpayers where we have vacant land. What kind of taxpayers will we have there? That's a separate question.
Yeah. Any other feedback?
I think from the perspective of some residents, it's true that the residential neighborhood is probably the priority concern. But I think because we're in a strip of commercial properties, I'm not sure that they defined Lathrup. I think they're there seen as a service. I don't know that there's a border in people's minds about, yeah, maybe when you cross 12 Mile, you're out of Lathrup. But in terms of developing that, I think the interest is clearly more residential than commercial.
Within the corridor?
Mm-hmm.
The corridors, yeah.
I mean, I question, if I asked my neighbors, what's downtown? What would they say? I don't know that even it's recognizable to people as downtown. I think that's a term that those who are interested in developing use, but it doesn't have the impact.
Right.
And there are some communities that you can clearly tell you're in their downtown area. I think ours is just short.
Yeah.
And so I think the focus of neighborhoods is probably more realistic. And maybe what the understanding is in some of the responses.
Yeah.
I might butcher this question. It's a more procedural question, I guess. When we talked about the kind of grand sections of the plan, housing, transportation, economic development, et cetera, community character is not one of those sections. So why is there a goal for it? It seems like it doesn't really fit the framework of the other things we've discussed. Is this a requirement to have a goal for this?
So, no, it's not a requirement.
Okay.
And I'm glad you asked that because my next challenge was going to be if you see something where you are like, I don't know that this really needs to be, it's more of a wordsmith thing, but so much as it is like a topical chapter thing, that
Yeah.
is something that could be looked at in a way, but it's not. The reason we didn't necessarily focus on it was because of the scope of it being an update. So back in that very first kickoff meeting, we took some of the feedback from that meeting and went back and forth with city staff to determine what those core focus topics could be. And
Okay.
then, all of the peripheral conversation that comes out of that could lead to an evolving process. Like right now where we're reassessing community character and saying maybe it needs to be assessed or maybe it just should, some of it should become part of the economic development and some of it should become part of the housing conversation, if that's what you're getting at.
When I'm, taking my best stab at drafting a better version of the goal for community character, I felt in my process I was just kind of like taking half of what I said on economic development and pairing it with half of what I said about residential. It seemed like this kind of gray area between the two. So I know it wasn't identified as a focus early on when you were coordinating this with the city, but will it have a section in the master plan? Are we just not addressing that section, or there's an option to just leave the section out?
Yeah, it does have a section, and by way of the nature of an update, typically if something wasn't necessarily talked about or wasn't marked up for revisions or changes, it would effectively stay the same.
Okay.
Because you're kind of amending an existing legal framework. So if you're not saying that you want to change it,
Sure.
then it would kind of remain the same. Does that answer your question a little bit clearer?
It does, but I have another question now.
Yeah.
I'm putting this together. If community character was not a part of the master plan that that was decided early on would be up for revision or update, should we be updating only the goal? Do you know what I mean? It seems like we're updating the heading, but not the subject matter below it.
So the subject matter does, in effect, get always kind of rewritten and reevaluated. You know, it gets updated with that data that we pulled. And if we're hearing from you guys and from the community that the community character goal is way different than what it was before, then the preceding chapter text would reflect on that.
Okay.
To what degree, though, you know, if it wasn't a huge focus, then typically that goal probably wouldn't be changed a lot. But as this is an evolving process, sometimes we don't know until somebody says, hey, it's not what we were thinking.
Well, perhaps based on the responses you received from all of us about this community character goal, that will provide you some clarity about whether or not you think we need to dive more in-depthly into this section of the plan.
Well, I'm a bit curious on the second part of the statement that talks about the mixed-use, multi-story, walkable downtown for the city. And if there's going to be a different direction for the downtown or the village center district in the zoning ordinance, then that might be a focus of changing this comment, if there is any proposed changes to that.
It's a muddle even there,
Yeah.
because when we talk about mixed use, multiple story, walkable, is that just for the 2 or 3 blocks we designated as downtown, or is it for the whole commercial strip?
Well, if the,
So,
oh, sorry, go ahead.
why have the downtown word even in there?
And that might be the reason to make a change to it if the idea or the thought is in the master plan to expand the mixed-use district throughout the corridors. Then you would say, well, if what you're saying about downtown in this statement now applies to the full Southfield Road, for example, then maybe you take out the word downtown.
Well, the only multiple story is even 2-story. There's nothing there that applies only to the downtown area.
Right.
So it's adding confusion.
Yes, I agree.
And I think I'm sensing just like maybe a philosophical difference between the current planning commission and the planning commission of 5 years ago, who may have treated this community character as more of an overall placemaking. Perhaps at that time they wanted to treat it as a holistic placemaking chapter, but now we are here in 2026 with this philosophy that maybe these two things need to be separated, or you want to focus on placemaking as it relates to housing and placemaking as it relates to economic development separately, and that's okay. But just to kind of, you know, rewind 5 years, that planning commission may have had a different philosophy at that time based off of, if I had to guess, conversations around the village center and how that tied into the neighborhoods.
Sure. And
This
with,
was,
please.
I was just gonna ask, this wasn't in the surveys that we asked residents to take, was it?
There was not a community character survey per se, but there are questions that touch upon placemaking. I'd say mostly in the economic development survey, asking people what kinds of businesses they would want to see, or what kind of a downtown or not downtown that they would hope to see. You know, what is their vision? And I think those kinds of things can inform how this chapter goes. But again, it wasn't like necessarily a focus of the update. Or on housing, you know, you might garner a community character by what people write. It sounds like there's a lot of quiet residential life, private neighborhood. You know, I'd say that describes the character and essence of what people are saying rather than like a specific question on it. if
So
that
is
answers
this
your
a
question.
part of the presentation because you're about to present relevant questions to us?
This is just provided right after the housing goal to kind of think about both goals if you want those two things to be changed. Not necessarily because there was data attached to that specifically, to answer your question.
Any other discussion on this? All
We
right.
can come back to it also, if need be.
Yeah.
Did I answer your question though, or did I?
Yep.
Okay.
Okay.
So now, shifting gears into transportation, we also had a transportation survey, and the first topical question, and I promise you guys, I did try to maximize the text size to fit within the presentation, but I know it is still small, so I will do my best to read through it. The first topical question in the transportation survey was, how do you usually access the following destinations? And we were really trying to get an idea of, do people walk? Do they bike? Would they take public transit? But diving even further into that, it's useful to know, well, maybe they drive to their work, but everybody walks everywhere to the park. And what we're seeing in this graph, the top one is asking people, how do you usually access places in your neighborhood? Over half of respondents said that they walk to places in their neighborhood. This is really important because it tells you, even though when we looked at transportation data earlier, that a lot of people drive their cars to work, or a lot of commuters drive their cars, we're seeing a more specific pattern that they drive their car to get to work, but they walk to places in their neighborhood. So that local street structure is still important for the pedestrian. But neighboring communities, almost 90% of respondents said that they drove. To get to Lathrup Village City Hall, that question was a little bit split. Some residents walk, some drive. A little bit of the respondents biked. Parks and recreation opportunities outside of Lathrup Village, almost everybody who answered this question said that they're going to drive. And that could be anywhere outside of Lathrup Village because we weren't specific about that, but it could be as close as Southfield as far as a national park. In terms of parks and recreation opportunities inside Lathrup Village, though, you can see it quickly flips, and now we have 43% of people walking to the local park, 10% don't go to the parks, almost 10% bike, and only 35% drive their car. To get to stores or businesses outside Lathrup Village, almost everybody reported driving. Stores or businesses inside Lathrup Village, about 3/4 drive, so you're still seeing a strong pattern of people driving to get to stores or restaurants. And so you as the planning commission could look at that and say, well, maybe there needs to be a stronger pedestrian structure, but also we know when people are picking up groceries and food and things, they're probably more likely to drive anyway. Places of worship, there's actually almost a third of the respondents reported NA, but people who do seek places of worship tend to drive to them. School, this one, it wasn't surprising that this was an NA on most of the respondents.
So the orange is NA?
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you for
And the
asking
blue
that.
is, yeah, I do that?
The blue is they drive their car.
Oh, okay, and then,
Yes.
sorry, the text is utterly unreadable at this distance.
Yes, and that's why I promise we really did try to
That's okay.
maximize the
So
text
just
to
so
fit.
I know, the blue is we drive, the purple is we walk?
Yep, blue is drive, purple is walk, green is bike,
Thank you.
and
Okay.
orange is NA.
Okay,
And there's a little bit of light blue for other too.
that's fine.
So you can really kind of see the big walking ones are places in the neighborhood, and parks and recreation opportunities in Lathrop Village. So people are walking around their neighborhood, they're walking to the park, they're not driving. For, compared to places outside of Lathrop Village where it's almost 100% of respondents that
So
you
the
see
basic takeaway would appear to be that sidewalks are valued for their ability to help people be safe in the community.
Potentially, as they serve the local functions. So we're kind of seeing a pattern here of people answering that to get to their local spots, they actually do get out and walk. In some communities, that may not be the case. People may not walk at all, but you see in your community that there is kind of that significant flip. I would expect it to be a little bit closer if there wasn't kind of that differentiation between things in your neighborhood and things outside.
Okay.
Are there any other questions about this one?
There's a tedious, long section on complete streets. 90% of it is irrelevant to Lathrop Village. We have two kinds of streets. We have the Southfield kind of street, and we have residential streets that don't have any need for a bike lane. And I'd like, if this document is to talk about movement forward, is as a bike rider who also uses his car for sometimes going 2 blocks at night, or at night when it might rain or something like that. I'm also thinking about what change I'd really like to see, and it has nothing to do with complete streets. It's that if I take my bike to the print shop up at the other end of this mile here, the logical way is, it would be nice if we had a nice wide bike path combination sidewalk along Southfield where I could use my bike for multiple stops, but I feel like a trespasser when I do that because it's clearly not meant for bikes. It's a residential street sidewalk on a major city street. Then you have some other place where sidewalks should be wide and expansive as a place to eat. Nobody wants to eat along Southfield Road, but it would be nice to ride your bike and go to the post office and maybe stop at another store or two, as opposed to always taking the car. And it's that, I think, to move the village forward, it's better to address the thing that's real, which is the possibility of widening that sidewalk along Lathrup, along Southfield, than to talk about unreal things about complete streets where they're only going to be what they already are anyway.
Any other discussion?
No.
All right. So then the next topical question in the transportation survey was, would you or anyone in your household use public transit if it were conveniently available? So this question is really tearing past not just, why don't you use public transit, but if it were, let's say almost right at your doorstep, would you even use it? And we did see most of the respondents answered no. That was about 45%. But there was a decent chunk as well. If you look at yes, occasionally, we saw about 25% of respondents, and yes, regularly. So indicating, some people indicated that they would regularly use it if it was convenient, potentially replacing the need to drive. And then there's also a bit of unsure. So I think that's an element you look at. Do we need to give more information there about public transit? But this just kind of gives you guys sort of a temperature check of, is this a service that's lacking that people would utilize? And then the next topical question is kind of the second part to this. So if you do not use public transportation, but otherwise would like to, what barriers do you feel prevent you from using public transportation? Please check all that apply. And of course, there was a good chunk that just weren't interested in using public transportation at all. But out of the people who would use it, it seems to be that the most common reasons for not doing so are that it would just simply take longer than driving in the car, so a time convenience, or that the buses do not come frequently enough, or there are no routes that go where people need to go, or at least not directly. But then there's a good amount about comfort and just unsureness about using the bus system that I think could be looked at by the planning commission potentially if there's an uncertainty about it. That would be amenable just through communication or information. That's something you could look into. And again, that's one of those things you're not necessarily talking about an infrastructure installment, but communication and partnerships between groups. So the City of Lathrup Village works with county and state agencies to improve safety and reduce congestion, especially where regional and local traffic meet. So this is around your borders, this question. How well would you say this city is doing in mitigating or improving each of the following? So this question was looking at a variety of different common traffic issues and asking how well is the city doing at controlling or improving these things. And the top marks were condition of sidewalks, lack of sidewalks, and traffic congestion. Generally, these scored a little bit higher than, say, speeding. That was the number one concern out of this question. That's the second bar from the left, received the lowest score, meaning that people felt the city was doing perhaps a lesser job at controlling speeding than they were the condition of sidewalks. So that seems to be where a lot of the concern lies, and I know from reading the open responses, and those open responses are public as well, speeding seems to be the number one concern here. But right behind that is unsafe intersections, right? Stop signs, pedestrian crossings. Those are all of your positions and places where you have the most traffic conflictions. And so I don't think that was particularly surprising, but if you have any commentary about this question or any questions, let me know.
Did you have something?
Yes.
By all means.
Most god-awful experience we have in this neighborhood is trying to go downtown on a Sunday morning. And how do you get onto Southfield? How do you cross the service drive? And any time during rush hour and any time in morning or evening rush hour, especially, of course, it's densified now with the ramps here handling several miles worth of traffic. But like the other day, after waiting for 5 minutes and having cars behind me, I finally had to stop one lane of traffic at a time, inch my way across the street, and other cars followed, weaving in between the cars who had all blocked our intersection. And it's just, sometimes it's hard to get out of the neighborhood in anything approaching the most direct way. And until that problem is addressed, I'm going to keep on bringing it up. The other thing, going back a slide, about, and nobody ever asked the question, what would you use public transportation for? Sundays, our weekends, we're always downtown for other reasons, and when there's a special event, God protect you if it's more than one special event at the same time. Parking's quite an ordeal, and you see people paying $50 to park, and you see people backing up the freeways for a mile trying to get toward parking. It's just crazy why nobody is providing mass transit that's focused on those big events that hits the major corridors so that people could, for a Tigers game or something like that, you could hop on a smart bus that's specifically designated for the downtown area and bypass all the parking, both the 2 hours walk to between your house and the seat, and 2 hours walking from the designation back to your car to, it's crazy. And that would be a different kind of scheduling than just, here's our regular hours, and 25 more people got on the bus for a special event. Well, the whole thing the system would collapse. So anyway, if cities like this, up and down these routes, would negotiate something for service to downtown, I think that would be great. And then, of course, the other thing is we have terrible access points, which is even pictured, I think, in the 21 report, where there might be a slab of pavement right next to the street. And that's telling a new resident who's going to try to live without a car, this community really ain't for you. Doesn't have you in mind. It's 3 comments. Sorry.
You're good. There were a few survey responses to the effect of the buses don't go where I want them to go, and the condition of the bus stops are not great. So I think you hit on both of those. More generally, like as a general takeaway theme, I gleaned from the survey responses is that residents had a lot more to say on the topic or through the lens of safety than they did on the topic of modes of transportation, for example. So there was a lot of emphasis on pedestrian safety, traffic calming, speed reduction, how to cross Southfield Road, etc. And I felt like far less engagement on they want to take a bus, they want to ride their bike, etc. Which I've synthesized and connected to kind of a general consensus among survey takers that they prioritize a safe and quiet Lathrup Village over a connected one or a bustling one or a highly connected one.
I'd like to really agree with my colleague that I think moving forward, we really should say something about the 11-mile service drive. It has really intensified the ability to go against traffic to enter Lathrup Village streets. So if you're heading south on Southfield Road and you want to turn left, especially where there's now a second traffic signal between 10 Mile and 11 Mile, where they put it at Lathrup and Margate, it really makes it difficult to turn onto those streets because of the speed of the traffic on Southfield Road, and you need to have a short distance to be able to get into your left lane to turn left. So now it's necessitated sometimes turning left the street before you're going to get there and come around another way. But every day, depending on what time it is, if I'm trying to go home, I really have to just put my heart in my hand and hope that people will stop and let me through, because the traffic is backed up from, the City Hall to 10 Mile. It's really terrible. And they use now, the first side street in order to get north on Southfield Road. And so it's kind of made our neighborhood, in my perspective, just a little more dangerous because of the speed that people travel. I know they've done some speed humps, bumps, whatever they're called, on the other side between Southfield and Evergreen. But I don't know if it would be as helpful, just because Lathrup is a boulevard with a lot of curves. And people, if you're driving too fast and you don't know the curves, or if the garbage truck is there, or if somebody is parked on one side of the street, the residents are going to get some ditches in front of their home or opposite their home. And so it helps it. There's no traffic in the middle of the night, but Otherwise, it's pretty difficult. And I think at some point it's going to be a significant deterrent. And something will have to happen to help people manage the traffic getting in and out of neighborhoods when you're turning against the incoming traffic where you're headed.
Thank you. Anybody else? Safety. Safer,
Safety.
calmer, slower, better managed.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and so this is abbreviated because the original question is a little bit lengthy in paragraph to maintain more visible text size, but this question is essentially describing for the past 15 years, the Road Commission for Oakland County has been planning the installation of a median along Southfield Road. The question goes to describe where and what streets these exist on and included a graphic along with it. And then asked the respondents, do they think that the city should continue working towards this boulevard project with the Road Commission for Oakland County, or should they not? And this is really kind of a split question. A yes comes out slightly on top, and there's still a good chunk here, though, that are unsure. About 1 in 5 almost respondents are unsure. So I'd say just gleaning off from this, there's more communication needed here, or potentially more information, but commissioners, if you have additional insights, be my guest.
Again, I want to encourage commissioners to read the elaborated responses because I gleaned a bit from there. I think it's fair to say a lot of people who said no may have said no because they simply don't think the city ought to pay for that. So there might be a financial consideration to the answering of no. There were more than one elaborated responses to the effect of, I'll believe it when I see it. Yeah, right. They've been dangling this carrot in front of us for 20 years. So I think some people are probably just exhausted by the plan and answered no accordingly. So I think you can glean a lot more from the kind of essay style responses than the yes or no. Any feedback?
So
Please, go ahead.
Sorry, did you have anything else on the?
Anything else?
Perfect. So then kind of wrapping this up, the survey on transportation did iterate what the previous transportation goal was, and that's to have an efficient and safe multimodal transportation network that offers mobility options to residents of all ages and abilities. And it simply asked, how well do you think the city is doing at achieving this? This received a score of 2.96
Out of 4?
5?
5?
5, yes.
Okay.
With 3 being like the neutral. So
Sure.
really there's like kind of 4 pointed options in one
okay.
way or the other. So this did technically receive a below average score, I'd say, compared to some of the other goals in the master plan. This one is rated on the lower side.
Yep.
As far as getting prior information, we could do more of a dig down and figure out, was it a lot of really extreme no's or extreme yeses or just kind of in the middle? But that's
Again,
kind
in the elaborated responses, a lot of frustrations about speeding, cut through traffic, greater desire for enforcement of traffic laws, et cetera. So I think there's a lot to glean from the written responses.
And then this was just kind of trying to dive down a little bit into the current master plan's action items. And this is really more of a situation where people were asked to rank importance, right? So they're kind of ranking these action items against each other in a way because they're presented together. So asking people, what's more important to you?
Right.
The highest level of importance action item was to enhance the experience of pedestrians, cyclists, and other non-motorized street users by integrating street lighting, furniture, and other amenities as appropriate. So it sounds like people are really, this one got quite a bit higher ratings than the others, really. But looking at that pedestrian experience, not just well, safety for one, but also that street lighting and the actual atmosphere making people feel safe. And then the lowest importance was to work with SMART and the Road Commission to improve bus stops in terms of safety and comfort of riders. I don't think this is surprising given the other questions about just a lack of interest in taking public transit. It's not that it doesn't exist, but the priority of the community in this question seems to be pedestrian-oriented infrastructure.
I don't think any of these are super focused on some of the drums I've been beating on about addressing cut-through traffic, speeding, traffic calming, all the above. So perhaps going forward, the goals ought to change to reflect what so many of the survey responses resounded.
I think you've categorized them enough, because we keep saying it. There's 3 or 4. And implementing, I mean, putting those in the goal would really give it the complete function that it needs.
Great.
Should we keep in mind that traffic patterns are likely to change when the 696 project is completed? Or should we be trying to judge against what it was like before that started?
I don't know that we should assume that it's going to finish and that things will change. I think once people get to know alternatives, they will continue to use them. So, yeah, 696 is speedier. But if traffic backs up with an accident, folks are going to find some other options. So,
And your action item in a case similar to that could just be to communicate more or have more regular interactions with regional traffic institutions or traffic organizations, right? So if it's something, I mean, traffic in general is a little bit more regional because you have the Road Commission for Oakland County, but you know, your action items don't necessarily have to dive down specific. They could be more communication oriented than infrastructure oriented.
So action items, as I'm understanding, are a way of delaying action as well, like saying, hey, we're going to look at this later?
Not necessarily to delay action, it's just that your action item could be to communicate more or establish more organization or meetings rather than necessarily like be a goal to build infrastructure.
Okay.
If that kind of differentiates a little bit.
To your earlier point, I always almost say councilman, Commissioner Gruer. I think it's possible that some of the responses that lean so heavily into the topics of safety and traffic calming, et cetera, could be in part influenced by the current conditions of roads in Southfield, which have a lot to do with the 696 construction project. I also think that if you've met anybody who lives on Lathrup Boulevard, give it 30 seconds and you'll hear complaints about how people use that street as a cut-through. And so I think there are some evergreen kind of complaints that the master plan could probably benefit from addressing on the topics of cut-through traffic, et cetera, which have nothing to do with this construction project.
Thank you.
Yeah, and if I may too, if you have those specific examples, feel free to send them our way. And if you want,
Sure.
you know, specific language iterated or that's like an action item that you want to look at, absolutely.
Sure.
So then we've already kind of started diving into this process, but that brings us back around to the goal on transportation as it is written now is an efficient and safe multimodal transportation network that offers mobility options for residents or to residents of all ages and abilities. That's what the goal aspires to. But based off of what you've heard on the survey, if any of you have any thoughts or commentary about the way this goal is written or organized, and I know Commissioner Hillman, you've submitted your responses, and you all may do that as well on your own if you want a more deep dive, but just kind of surface level feelings towards it.
I'll get back to you.
I guess everybody's aware that our sidewalk network is not complete. And our streets are not all paved, including streets leading to parks that are therefore technically inaccessible by wheelchair or mothers with strollers. And the biking maps are not nearly as helpful as my dream sidewalk along Southfield. And we certainly don't want the complete street approach to Southfield to include bike lanes on Southfield. God help us, we didn't even try that. Okay. If we don't have mobility, if we don't have complete sidewalks that actually go to a street corner and go across the street, you know.
I remember at least one elaborated response to the effect of our sidewalks don't connect. You get to the end of the sidewalk, and that should not be.
You get to a ditch.
That's right.
Yeah, how do I cross the ditch?
Yeah. My suggestion, again, harkens back to safety and also some incorporation of a transportation network that respects what ought to be the quiet character of the residential neighborhoods. And unfortunately, for some people who live closest to either 696 or Southfield Road, that is not the case for them right now. So some intentionality about making that a little bit better in the go forward.
All right. So moving into the economic development topical results, this was another one of those 0 to 5 rating questions that's weighted as a mean average. Support for new and existing commercial and employment centers are currently planned primarily along Southfield Road, 696, and the 12-mile road corridors, and in the Village Center District, which exists in the current master plan. How important is it to you that new business development is focused in these areas? Again, this is one of those questions you don't know unless you ask, and this was rated at a 4.4. This is one of the higher rating questions that I saw out of all 4 surveys. It seems to be very important, at least to the responses of this survey, that new business development stay or remain focused in the areas of Southfield Road, I-696, and 12-mile corridors. And then I'll keep moving through the topical questions, but if you have commentary, please feel free to stop me. The next topical question is, Lathrup Village has historically been considered a bedroom community where people live in the city and commute elsewhere to work. Moving forward, should the city of Lathrup Village work to provide more employment opportunities locally? And this actually did have an interesting response because it, deviates from that historical description of it being a bedroom community. 30% of respondents said yes, they would like to see more employment opportunities locally. 46% of respondents indicated yes, but only small or medium-sized businesses. So there seems to be kind of a threshold there for some people, not wanting like necessarily a massive employment center, like a warehouse or anything like that. But 17% said no, and 5% were unsure. So overall, it does seem like the responses, at least gleaned from this survey, do indicate yes, people are interested in that employment local opportunity. And then we asked, what types of businesses or industries would you like to see grow or locate in Lathrup Village? The options were several, but some of the top options that people picked were retail and shopping industries to grow in Lathrup Village, dine-in restaurants, and cafes. Those really stood out among the top 3. All sort of your catering to the neighborhoods, right? I think that it carries that same line through, that same thread from the other surveys. The lowest being light industrial manufacturing and other, some takeout restaurants or professional offices, but generally people seem to highly rate things that would improve sort of your pedestrian experience facing the street. But I don't want to get too much into the interpretation on my end. That's just what I was seeing.
Well, I think in a lot of the elaborated responses, what I saw was an emphasis on not economic development for the sake of it, but for the sake of enhancing quality of life for Lathrup Village residents. And I think that's also reflected in the data here. It's less about, you know, corporate office space or whatever else,
Right.
and more about missing commercial elements along the corridor that enhance what's going on in the
Employment.
neighborhoods, cafes, restaurants, shops, etc. I think in this case, the data points happen to jibe really nicely with the elaborated responses.
And is it a question of wanting employment or wanting the space to be productively occupied?
I saw very little written response about feeling strongly that survey takers wanted their place of work to be in Lathrup Village specifically.
It's not that. It's really not generating employment for Lathrup Village people. I wonder in that one that uses the word manufacturing, it's tied to the maker place, sort of like crafts. But what about drones, for example? Suppose somebody, apparently Ukraine is showing us you can set up a drone factory in almost any building. And would this be a place for light manufacturing of drones where 20 or 30 people could work near a restaurant for their break times? You know, is that a stretchable category? Is that desirable, or just is that a third rail? Just don't touch that.
It sounds very specific to me. As a survey taker, my gut tells me if I was thinking about that type of manufacturing, I would categorize it as light industrial manufacturing, not artisan or local maker manufacturing.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a very large disparity between those two data points.
Yes.
So my gut tells me that the manufacture of
Okay, is that
of
there?
technology is not popular
Okay,
as
I see it now.
presented in this.
I didn't see that.
Yeah, and I can clarify too, they're right next to each other. There is a difference, for the record, between the light industrial and more of the artisan local makerspace manufacturing, which is what Austin and Tom have been working on very diligently over the last several months, and that does actually have a more positive response, that local artisan manufacturing, which includes that piece typically of a retail storefront. So again, that neighborhood serving component exists there as well.
Yeah, in fact, it appears to be the most popular option of the ones that aren't service businesses like cafes, dine-in restaurants, or retail businesses.
It's
Absolutely.
interesting. Don't we get a lot of complaints from people about all the restaurant traffic, and because these are a lot of outsiders coming in and maybe late at night and so on.
Well,
Yeah.
there is a distinction here between dine-in restaurants and takeout restaurants.
Yeah.
Obviously,
Yeah.
there's an emphasis on preferring dine-in restaurants, so
Sure.
maybe that's reflected here as you would expect it to
Okay.
be.
Okay, get it?
And just kind of circulating back to your transportation survey, most respondents did indicate that they do walk to places in the neighborhood. So potentially, you know, if they're, this is a little bit, you know, just thinking, but if people are actually walking most places in their neighborhood, they're probably thinking about that dine-in experience and not so much about like how the traffic impacts they're getting there per se.
Sure.
But of course, not creating additional traffic on their route home from work, where they did respond that they drive to and from work as opposed to walking.
How many people have ever seen a pedestrian cross 696 at the bridge?
I'm too tired at that time of day to notice. Not many.
Well, so then we asked, how well would you rank your satisfaction with each of the following in Lathrop Village? We asked about job opportunities, access to everyday goods and services, retail variety, dining and nightlife, healthcare services, tourism and visitor attractions, the entrepreneurship and innovation climate, and overall business climate and activity. People.
Are these out of 5 again, or out of 4?
That is out of 5.
Okay.
So this is a weighted question again. 0 being completely unsatisfied, 5 being very satisfied. Respondents were the most satisfied with healthcare services and access to everyday goods and services in Lathrop Village. So generally, I think people felt that they could access healthcare services nearby if they needed to, or access to everyday goods and services. I think that uniquely to Lathrop Village, it's a smaller entity, so you're not necessarily looking at, you're probably looking at your surrounding area, Southfield, for those kinds of things. But people felt the least satisfied about retail variety and tourism and visitor attractions, so that would give you a hint as to what maybe are some of those missing gaps or components that Lathrop Village could take advantage of that apparently may not exist in the surrounding area. So people feel that their healthcare needs are being met, but maybe the retail variety isn't there. So Lathrop Village could then capitalize on that if the other nearby entities have not.
So you've administrated other surveys like this for other communities, presumably, as a consultant?
Similar surveys,
Sure.
yes.
So like, when you see those gaps, those don't look substantially, like there doesn't really appear to be a large variability there. So when you say this is the lowest, it doesn't really look to my eye that there is a lot of stock to put in that, because they're all almost the same.
Yeah, and that's a fair question. So part of that is because it's a weighted average, so you're kind of getting sort of this aggregate from hundreds of people answering all at once, all these voices, right? So essentially, typically people tend to answer one way or the other, but you're going to get neutral responses that kind of pull everybody back to the middle. So you're going to see that canceling out, and you're not going to have like a huge difference, right? Like things kind of tend to balance out unless people feel strongly one way or the other, and then you know that that's really something you need to look into. But that's pretty common across all of these sort of surveys. Like you're just going to see a variety of answers that are weighted, so they're pulling each other towards that center. So you're kind of temperature checking what are more people feeling than most. I think as Commissioner Hillman stated earlier, you typically can't please everybody in a community, so this is kind of giving you a temperature gauge of how.
I mean, there were
survey
definitely some that
respondents.
had consensus, but you keep talking about a weighted average. In the
Yeah.
report, does it describe that methodology? Because like that's a very specific statistical term.
Yeah, absolutely.
You didn't just say it's an average, so I'm just curious, is that explained in the report, or do I have to email you if I want to know more?
Yeah, we can email you a better description of like the actual math that goes into that. But it is just basically a mean of all of the scores. So it assigns each response a whole number between 0 and 5.
Yeah.
But I can we
I
can
just
send
want to
you
know,
the
are any of the
breakdown.
numbers literally given more weight than any of the other numbers? Or if I answer 5 and he answers 0, is it a 2.5?
Yes.
So it's just a regular average.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any more questions, like just general data-wise or information? And we can send like a follow-up and.
Actually, I think you answered it.
Okay. But just for the public too, I want the public to know that, we can include information about the analysis as well. So then, kind of moving into the comprehensive plan goal on economic development, was thriving local businesses and an employed workforce, a convenient selection of goods and services, and a diverse tax base with a resilient economy. How well do you think the city is doing at achieving this goal as it is written? This received a lower than average score, so I'd say that economic development and transportation received your lowest scores in terms of how well the city was doing at achieving the goal.
There's a lot of grumpy responses about the condition of Southfield Road
Yeah.
and the businesses along it.
Absolutely.
Of course, that was a very generalized statement. There were positive things offered as well, but the resounding theme for me is that the businesses along Southfield Road, beyond their general quality or condition, aren't necessarily neighborhood-serving businesses. At least not enough of them are.
Any other commentary related to that? And yeah, I think that kind of loops it back around. This is your current goal. Do you, as the planning commission, foresee any changes to this goal at this time, the way that it's written, or any common themes that you notice?
It would appear, based on what's been shared, that an employed workforce is almost irrelevant to our goals. Arguably, you could even get rid of the part about thriving local businesses, because presumably if we have a convenient selection, we're using it.
I mean, this is one I kind of ripped apart in my suggestion. I think it's incredibly vague to the extent that it could be slapped on any city anywhere and offends nobody, but be specific to nobody either. So I really think our goal ought to, and this is based on my read of the survey responses, really needs to emphasize a neighborhood serving commercial environment is how I put it. High quality reinvestment and redevelopment along Southfield and 12 Mile Road that improves safety, appearance, and walkability. And promote commercial corridors that complement the adjacent neighborhoods and contribute to the distinctive character and long-term sustainability of the community. Any other spoken feedback for now? Keeping in mind that we ought to be submitting our written feedback as well.
One of the things I keep in mind as we talk about economic development, as it's focused on the corridors, is the housing component. And just, should that be included? Should it not be included? How would it work in if it was to be included? More of the mixed use approach that we've talked about. And so I just want to be mindful of that, you know, when we talked about we'll draft something and then get it back to you, that could be one of the topics where I missed the mark if the idea is not to have as much residential of a focus in the commercial corridors.
Yeah, that's,
So
that's a good question, and I
yeah.
think that potential residential development in the commercial corridors has been a resounding point of discussion over the course of several meetings. I happen to not include it in my commercial development goal that I wrote, not because I don't think it's a priority, but because I don't think that's commercial development. I think that's
Right.
residential development.
Right.
So I slipped it in another goal called housing, right? So I personally feel like it really ought to be part of it based on the numerous conversations we've had on the topic, whether it fits best in housing, commercial development, or both, I guess is up to our wordsmiths / aggregators / authors.
I think what we want to see is a prospering Southfield Road. A prospering, attractive, vibrant, we don't care if it's businesses or housing, but we don't have enough people for the businesses that are there, so it kind of sounds, and there's not a demand for the kind of business space we've been offering, even when it's in a newer condition, as we heard in the discussion about Southfield and their newer approaches to professional office space, that they can't fill it either. So the question is, how can we, from a tax point of view and an image point of view, how can we create the most thriving, vibrant use of that space? And if it's serving people from all points of the globe coming to buy diamonds of a particular quality here, that's fine. If it's something that serves only residents, that's fine. But let it be something that adds vibrancy and sparkle to that strip and generates income for the city to support the tax-supported services that we all need. So it's not so much that we'll get jobs out of it or our kids will get jobs out of it. It's that the city will be supported as a civic entity and thriving place where people meet and do business or meet with each other or enjoy life. Right now, it's not thriving in any way, sense of the word, any sense of the word. It's just not thriving. It's not generating income for the city, and it's not generating services for the people.
Sure. I mostly agree with that. I think there's a lot of survey responses that are simply grumpy about the condition of Southfield Road. Where I want to deviate a little bit is I do think the survey takers have given us some amount of specificity in terms of what they would like to see along Southfield Road. I don't think it's as straightforward as whether it's a diamond empire or something else. They'll take what they can get so long as it's not gloomy and empty. I think the survey responses seem pretty clear that they would like to see a commercial corridor that is both vibrant, better looking, greener, but also full of kind of, I think the buzzword is like space-making type establishments, cafes, restaurants, retail locations, things like this. And so I do think they provide us some amount of specificity about what they would like to see there, not just anything that's better than gray and gloomy.
Well, I was thinking of more of the blending of the housing versus business development. Either way,
Yeah,
it complements the city in many ways.
sure.
And more housing will complement the businesses we have there.
Yeah,
So I think what's depressing is to see a lot of empty, drab, old buildings.
yeah.
And if there are some new thriving businesses, then we'll have more customers for new thriving restaurants. We have an awful lot of restaurants in this part of Oakland County.
Any other commentary? Cool.
All right, and so then to just round off all these goals, I'm gonna hand it off to Eric to talk a little bit more about future land use and what we want to do with that ahead of the open house.
Yep. So looking at the screen, we have the current future land use map before us. So everything in yellow, the vast expanse of the community, is future land use designated as single-family residential. There's small portions along the 11-mile 696 corridor and the western boundary of the community, which is designated multifamily. Institutional dominates the northwest section of Lathrup Village. Office we have along the south side of 12 Mile Road, which is the northern boundary of the community, as well as the office complex along 696 on the west side. And then the commercial vehicular is designated in red, so those are your intersections of Southfield Road at both 12 Mile and 11 Mile, 696. And then between those, extending from the village center in purple, is the mixed use, future land use. And so this is where we kind of start to think outside the box in terms of what we would like to see and create, envision. As you know, the village center district is zoned village center, so it has its own standards within the zoning ordinance. One of the things that stands out on this map is the little stub that sticks out of the village center district on the west side. That, based on some of the commentary that we've received from residents in that area, that they would like to potentially entertain converting that back to single-family residential. And we would be looking at the correlation between the boundaries of, I think that, is that El Dorado?
Yeah, well,
This one. Carolina. No, whatever it is.
It's
California, sorry.
California and Stanford Court.
Yeah, so just we would be looking at the correlation between land uses, you know, between residential and the village center standards within the zoning ordinance. So, again, the mixed-use district along Southfield Road primarily covers the majority of, bless you, of Southfield Road through the community. And so that essentially opens up the possibility for a mixture of uses already. And so then that begs the question, should the vehicular commercial also be considered as mixed use? And I know we were talking a little bit about getting creative with the empty or underutilized office district to the north along 12 Mile Road as ways of possibly implementing residential mixed use within those parcels as well. And then I think lastly, what to do about the village center district, and if the current goal of that area is sustainable, or if it's something that needs to be looked at again, given the responses in the survey, the discussions that we've had, and potentially what we might uncover more so at July's open house. So, floor is the planning commission's to start the conversation on that, what your thoughts might be, and we'll definitely take note as we progress.
One of the first points you made was the kind of nose of if the village center is a human's face on the profile, the nose at Stanford Court. I do think it's worth a decision about whether or not we should revert certain sections of this future land use map back to single family. But I'd add it's not only that nose section of the face. For example, on the east side of the city, along East California, those are residential lots. And I know of at least one person on one of those residential lots who's been taken off guard by seeing this map, I suppose. So I'm not sure, none of us were around when this village center concept, at least not around on the planning commission, when this village center concept was really emphasized. So I can't speak to why these single-family residential lots were incorporated into this map, but I think it's worth discussion, not necessarily now, about if that makes sense and if perhaps that's too ambitious and perhaps startling for people on those lots to see.
Well, we've had this discussion before, and it's clear that this image, which undermines their confidence in investing in their own residential property. So, and that goes both for the east side, but also, let me say, the sinuses on the face, behind the nose.
Yes.
You have another row of residential on the west side of Southfield as well.
That's right.
And this has all the earmarkings of being something that people came up with because of how the original architect laid out the streets. It just was attractive to work with the idea of could we make something of this and call it downtown. But I don't think there was much consultation on the people living on those blocks. Thought they bought a house in on a residential street, and all of a sudden you're talking about, well, it could be, I mean, we could put stores in there or apartments or whatever, you know. That's very disturbing to people.
There was actually a fair amount of public input when they went through these design concepts. I think it was discussed and anticipated that would be more of like a promenade with step down into the residential. I think there was a water fountain at some point that someone wanted back there. So there was a lot of public input, and at the time the consensus was that everybody wanted a downtown village kind of feel, and this is what they came up with.
You know, go along with the boulevard down the middle.
There's actually, yeah, it actually, I think this concept kicked off before the boulevard was, became a reality. At that time, the road commission was still proposing just a narrow median, not a full-blown boulevard.
It sounds like you remember the history of this a bit. Do you know if this future land use map, as we see it here, does this predate the 2021 revision
this
to the
goes
master
back
plan?
This goes back to like 2009, 2010, I think.
That is,
Okay.
yeah, 2009.
Okay. So, technical question, I suppose. It sounds like there's at least some interest in revising this future land use map. Is a revision to the future land use map something that goes at, like, do we act to change the map and that's what goes in the master plan? Or is it more like you set a goal or objective to reconsider and revise the future land use map? I don't know what that, if we do propose a change to this, when does that happen? I
Yeah,
guess?
it would be, I think, right at adoption. So it would be discussed what the proposed changes would be, and Scott, maybe you can help kind of elaborate on that a little bit more. But we would take into consideration what type of change you'd like to make. So for example, kind of the most obvious one is the little nose. And if the consensus was that that should be reverted back to single-family residential, and that's how we would incorporate that into the revised master plan and future land use map, then would it be upon adoption that would?
I think I'm trying to remember exactly the process when we did this. I think it was, we just, rezoned it all as part of that, as that process, but I'd have to
Okay.
verify that.
Okay, so yeah, we'd work more on that.
I guess my question is does the rezoning occur before the master plan is finalized, or do you use the master plan to describe your intention to consider changing it?
It could be either or.
Okay.
So you could adopt the rezoning as a result of the master planning process, or you could just leave it, like the Gateway overlay district where Michigan First is. That was anticipated to be rezoned, a prior master plan anticipated that, or envisioned that the potential for expansion of Michigan First may require rezoning. So some of those parcels were identified as being expanded prior to them actually being rezoned to Gateway overlay. So you could do it either way, but my recollection is that when we did come up with the village center concept, that was rezoned shortly after adoption. Maybe not necessarily as part of the adoption of that master plan. But I'll verify
The
that.
master plan you thought came first?
I
The-
think so, yeah.
Okay.
And to clarify as well, it's like more of an allowance process. It's not that it necessarily would force people to rezone their property. It's more if somebody so chose to make their property higher density, it would allow them to do so.
Well, that's exactly what people are concerned about. I have the next property, not that property.
And that is
I
a
didn't.
concern.
I bought this on the assumption I was on a block with other houses. And I invested my life savings in that. And now you're saying, oh, but somebody could move in next door and build an apartment house on the land.
If the future
That's
land,
what this says.
so if the future land use map, let's say, did match a higher density, there would be considerations that go into it aside from the future land use map. You'd look at a site plan, you would have to, well, if it was just a rezoning, you wouldn't have to, but the future land use map would give you, the planning commission, a legal framework to determine whether you approve something like that or not, or in this case, recommend it for
That's just a more detailed
rezoning.
way of saying the same thing. It's just a
It depends,
technical
though.
way of saying the guy next door.
He would
could.
have legal jurisdiction, more legal jurisdiction than not being residential, yes. So he would have a reason to go to you and say,
Yeah, I understand.
yeah, look at, I want this higher density, your future land use map supports it. But I think to Attorney Baker's point that at this period in time, in 2009, there was public engagement surrounding it and there was notice and people, the planning commission didn't just, paint a magic wand
Yeah.
necessarily. It was an entire process to
Not trying
come
to-
up with that.
Not trying to say bad things about them, but for people who have since bought into this neighborhood, their realtors didn't tell them, this is a really great house. Now, there could be an apartment next door, but we'll take that in consideration on the offer we're making. No, that doesn't come up. These people bought it on good faith. This is a residential street, a residential block, in a nice community.
And I think
So now they're finding out through this plan process, it's not the same as not the same kind of property that people have on the next street.
So I think that maybe that begs the question on whether or not any parcel that's not abutting Southfield Road should potentially be considered to be brought back to single-family residential, which would then open up a lot of possibilities for amending the Village Center District, because now you're gonna have a lot of parcels that may not be in alignment with the standards of the Village Center District, which could potentially account for, the acquisition of some of the parcels to make development possible or worthwhile. And so you'd be forced kind of more into the restrictive nature of the mixed-use district and the narrowness of the parcels. And so perhaps, if those outer single-family residential parcels were rezoned back to residential, then you would be left with just the parcels abutting Southfield Road.
You limit the original vision of the village center.
Exactly,
Yeah.
and so that would be a complete overhaul of the village center, both in the master plan and within the zoning code.
so. We, as your consultants, would challenge you then to, give us very specific thoughts and feedback based off of what you've heard. It does sound like the residential property is, at least in the exterior of the village center, are a concern, but just now our next task, along with those potential rewrites of goals, would be to present your edited version of the future land use map at the open house, so then the public can take a further look at it and we can kind of go back and forth, so.
I'm confused. Are we being asked to make a decision about this tonight?
Not necessarily tonight. We're just kind of introducing this map, this process, and saying over the next couple weeks, think about it a little bit more. If you have specific properties that you would like to explore changing the future land use on, and again, this is just sort of the the vision, right? Not necessarily rezoning anyone's properties. And it's not an official decision until the master plan would be adopted. This is just, we're coming up with an edited revision.
Is this supposed to be part of the presentation that is happening in 1 month?
So it's not necessarily a presentation, but so much as it is like boards around
Like the
the
open
room.
house thing? Is
Yeah,
this supposed to
yeah.
be part of the open house next month?
Yes.
Okay.
So the idea would be to get further feedback from the community, you know, from participants.
Okay.
To say a little bit more about that, I don't think the goal or intention is to have a finalized change to the future land use map to present at the open house.
Right.
It's
Yes.
to quite possibly present the future land use map as it currently exists and gather feedback about it from the participants at said open house.
Yeah, and maybe we can take some concepts of the discussions that we've had related to the future land use map. And I don't want to say like steer participants, but like give them the ideas or the thought processes behind potential changes to the future land use map. Like, for example, the office corridor on 12 Mile Road, and entertaining that as being a mixed use to allow for housing, for example. So it's just to kind of spur thought on what types of change, if any, would be beneficial in the future land use map.
I'm kind of reading this part of our discussion similar to the discussion about pervious and impervious surfaces we had in the study session, which is, it sounds like this is something we ought to talk more about. And whether that happens before we vote to approve a revision to the master plan or something we start talking about in the wake of that matters less to me, but I think there's been significant enough discussion about it tonight and at previous meetings that it ought not fall by the wayside until the next revision of the master plan comes up again.
No, I would add, I mean, I've brought this up before. I think this right here is probably the single most important thing that could potentially come out of this master plan update is, are we going to continue with the village center plan, desire, concept? Is it going to go away altogether? Is it going to be shrunk in some capacity? Or how? That's probably going to have more of a tangible effect than any of the other things that we've discussed in this plan, because that's going to be, because this, this says future land use map, but that is pretty much exactly what your current zoning map looks like. So that right now it's not potential that that's village center, that is village center. So these residential properties are currently zoned village center. So if somebody wanted to come in tomorrow and build a 5-story building there, they are zoned appropriate for that use currently. So that's not something that this could, so to Dennis's point that, this could potentially be, but that is your actual land use. So do you want to remove that? Those are, like I said, that's probably one of the biggest things, and I think that's something that you definitely are going to want to get as much feedback from as many residents as possible. Because again, you've done really well on the survey results in terms of getting participation, but there's 4,000 people that live in this city, and if you're going to change something, people's zoning, you might want to get some input from those people that live in those homes. So again, I can't stress enough the importance of, and then again, there's been so much time, resources, and effort from previous bodies that have gone into, not only coming up with this concept, but design guidelines, writing the zoning ordinance to allow for and promote. So, if there is a change made to this, that's all work that this body will have to do in the future. So you're going to have to, like Hannah's saying, you're going to have to, maybe we have to revisit the height. And, these were going to be 5-story and then adjacent to commercial or residential. I think we had 3-story, kind of to step it down. So, there's going to be a lot of work in the future that stems from either changing this or potentially leaving it as is and further restricting what can and can't go there. So just want to make that point that I think this is really, really something that we should focus a lot of energy on.
Sure. Well, we haven't had a meeting dedicated to the village center. And were there survey questions specific to the village center? Do we know? I don't know that there were necessarily.
I don't think so.
Nothing directly pointed at, like, do you want the village center as it is? It's more kind of gauging how people envision the commercial corridor for Lathrup Village. And it sounds like preliminarily from the responses that that's as a neighborhood serving corridor, as you spoke about. So I think that's kind of where you as the planning commission, right, kind of glean that information and then change not really change, but we're just drafting, we're just proposing potential changes and then presenting this at the open house, which is a public event. It's going to be something that's a little, we can capitalize off the momentum of this process to get it seen by more people and then get preliminary feedback there. But then later in the process, when you're really kind of talking about adopting, making changes, rezoning, way later in the process, you're gonna get more feedback from people, especially the business owners and the potential residents that kind of a thing might affect.
Okay. Well, to that end, I think whatever booth, et cetera, exists at the open house on the topic of the future land use map, we got to work hard to make sure that it gathers specific feedback on that topic.
I think as well the introduction is going to make sense, because if you put this slide up, it says future land use. They don't have the history of the future was back then, not now, and today going forward. So I think clarifying it, even from its title, will be important to keep people from overreacting, as we might say, or having some concerns about, because some may have never known that their home
Right.
was this way and what it could possibly mean.
Absolutely. I think to your point, would you kind of envision like a sort of a poster that talks about, hey, here's how we got here, here's where it was, where do you want us to go next? Maybe
Well, I'm
something
not
like
clear how
that?
you're going to present, if it's going to be a poster setup, if it's going to be on a screen that people will see without a discussion. So I don't know what to advise on that.
Yeah, and I guess I will take this time to kind of clarify or talk with you a little bit more about the open house. I think we're all open to feedback, but what we were sort of initially picturing is an open house style event in the room downstairs, different stations on different things. Planning commissioners, you are welcome to, be at different tables, talk to the public. You can run different tables and kind of have more specific information about a topic if you would like, but we're completely open to feedback or ideas, and we did want to use the sort of tail end of this meeting in the next couple weeks of communication to kind of, if anybody has, ideas that you would like to see presented.
Are you going to be at the open house?
Yes, absolutely.
So then you're going to be available to answer questions the public has?
Yes, yep.
Okay.
Does each section get an introduction, or is it just going to be walk up and go to economic development, walk up and go to Parks and
I
Rec?
think what we've done in the past is have an introduction, an explanation on how we envision the event to function, and so it would be just to be have the broken out areas, mainly centered upon the goals that we have established, and that's the importance of making sure we have the right goals written from your perspective before we get to that point. And so then it would be a discussion about the goals and objectives and envisions that the residents would want to comment on. And then, of course, we would have one area for the future land use map and take into consideration all of the discussion that we're having right now in regards to that. And we can talk about that at the introduction as well, to just give a brief explanation of what the future land use map is and how it, especially as it relates to the Village Center District and anyone who's participating that evening who might be impacted by that, just give a brief explanation of that
Yeah.
for direction, yeah.
Normally it's like there'll be a housing booth, an economic development booth, a transportation booth, and it doesn't have to be like a booth or a table, but it would be like a station and you would have background information, what's happened, what the engagement was, and what you as the planning commission are proposing, or kind of what's the direction you're heading based off of that engagement. It's sort of your check-in with the public. This is what we heard. This is what we think the direction that the public generally wants to go in, and this is what we are proposing. And then that's where you can kind of have those more detailed conversations. And because it's these little breakout booths, we're having, you know, lots of discussions and interactions between people that, you know, are harder to do in a more formalized setting like this. Does that answer your question a little bit more?
A little bit more.
And there could be games or like interactive things. It doesn't have to just be a poster or anything like that. You know, it can be fun. It can be like more light. You know, people typically sometimes will bring like kids to these events, or there will be things going on. It doesn't necessarily have to just be like a, you know, walk from one poster to
Rigid.
the next. So, and that's where we encourage you as the planning commission, if you do have, hey, I'm really passionate about housing, or I want to say something in this master plan about, let's say, like access to senior housing in the community, you know, we could cater to that a little bit if you feel like that's an important thing that you want to test the waters with at this point. Just as an example.
Sure. Okay. Well, I know I'm particularly interested in public feedback on this future land use map, so you'll probably see me hovering around that section of the event, perhaps more than some of the other sections.
Good for you.
Yeah. I do have one technical question. Is the graphic a graphic you have domain over? Like, can you change the graphic, or is this like a still image the city gave you from 20 years ago that?
It's in it's in ArcGIS. We can change it at will, and we can change the colors and everything about it.
Yeah, you knew where I was going with this. I have a very uninteresting and common form of color blindness that makes it impossible for me to distinguish between some of these colors. So if we could just use colors that are more distinct from one another, that'd be really helpful. Office and mixed use look exactly the same. I know what's what because I know where they are on the map, but I can't see the difference. So a Google search about which colors help people like me would do the trick. I'd appreciate
Yeah.
it.
Absolutely. I think that's a completely doable change, and I think Lathrup Village is, in some ways, you guys are fortunate that you actually are working with fewer districts. We have some communities
Yeah.
that have upwards of 20 or more.
How many more colors can we possibly come up with? Yeah.
Well, then you get into patterns,
Yeah.
and that does get a little hard to read.
Yeah.
So I think that's totally doable.
Appreciate it.
Mhm.
Any other discussion on this? All right.
I guess in moving forward, to have those forms submitted, and the sooner we get those, the sooner we can kind of wrap our minds around formulating, you know, the feedback that we receive from you to revise those goals.
What day's the open house again?
Thank
Same
you.
day as the next planning commission meeting, and
Is
it's
it-
gonna be before, in lieu of doing a study session.
So is it 6 again, or is it
No,
earlier?
it's gonna be earlier in the day.
At
Sure.
Like 4:30?
It's 4 to 7. Mhm.
Do we wanna do it earlier than that? Do we wanna do it at 3? Or do you think 3 hours?
People work.
I think it's fine as planned.
Yeah. So we would have the open house, and then there's still a scheduled planning commission meeting afterward.
Yes, sir.
You're kidding.
And it would be, you know, it would be open house style, so, you know, you wouldn't necessarily have to be there right at 4 if it did.
But your absence will be noted.
I heard that.
You're mic'd.
Not like, though.
Okay. Is there something to present on this slide, or just to emphasize us to return the forms?
I think I do have actually one question. Would it be helpful if we provided a form for future land use thoughts and takeaways like the others?
Sure, yeah.
Okay.
Is this PowerPoint part of the stuff I'm sorry, I don't remember, that was already provided to us?
It's not in the, it's not in
Could
the
it be?
agenda packet.
The PowerPoint? Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you.
You mean, just to clarify, like you would like a copy of this PowerPoint after the meeting or like going forward?
No, just this one
Okay.
after the
yes.
meeting so that I can look at it on my own time.
Yes, absolutely. And right now too on the website, I also do have the previous ones, but I will add them into a share filed folder and send Austin the link so you have like more direct access to all of them.
Okay, thank you.
Absolutely.
To that point, I would like to say that the data you presented tonight was rolled up, summarized data. And the agenda packet for tonight's meeting is elaborated data. So I remember Commissioner Nordmo had an example that the answer ended up being, well, this question was answered on like a sliding scale. I think if you look at the data in its more detailed form, which is in the agenda packet, that will be a little clearer.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you for that.
Yeah. Anything else?
Guess real quick, just to add to that, part of this process, right, is digging through a lot of this data and turning it into a format that is more public friendly at the open house. I would expect the posters will be a little bit more digestible because we've
Yeah.
got a bigger space to work with.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Is that the end of the presentation?
Yes,
All right.
Thank you,
Very good.
guys.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Hannah. Where am I at? Sorry, I got 10 tabs open and all papers in front of me.
8
All right.
and 8.
Moving along to general communications, site development update plan. Mr. Colson, Mr. Kennedy.
One second, please.
Get back to
There
your
you go.
spot.
No worries. Thank you. Thank you both, Eric and Hannah, for getting through that data. We only closed the surveys a couple weeks ago, so to be able to go through that data in such a timely manner is appreciated. So thank you. And then I'm gonna get our site development report set up so that we can go through it, take a look. Just one moment.
While he's doing that, Scott, I have a question. Duplexes, are they allowed in single-family residential?
Yes, I think we have an R2 that allows for duplexes.
Okay. Okay, just making sure. We were trying to figure that out back there while we were talking about the future land use map. I wanted to.
I'll double check that.
So we got an exciting one at top here at 17600 11 Mile Road. This property was recently sold to a chiropractor who there were two tenants in the building. One was a hair salon and the other was an accounting firm. They moved out and the chiropractor office moved on in from Beverly Hills. So they had a grand opening on May 30th. They did some interior build out earlier in the month of May, and they are now open and operating in the hair salon. They're remaining. To the south of us at 27300 Southfield Road. This was a property that was approved back for a site plan in February of 2024, and they've still failed to accomplish two of the components of the site plan. One is to build a divider wall between the residential district behind it and the alleyway. We have had conversations with them over the last couple of months regarding completion of the site plan, and we did give them a deadline of 30 days, and that was about 20 days ago, to get a permit submitted and to do due diligence over the next 90 days to complete the wall. We're not seeing that action, so we're gonna stay on top of that, make sure they complete these two components of the site wall, and also get an encroachment license for the parking spots that were approved in the alleyway. It was a two-way alleyway behind it, but they got approved to have angled parking along the building so that they had more parking spots for that particular building, but they have not submitted an encroachment license permit to be reviewed by city council, so we're also in discussions with them to complete that aspect of their site plan. Across the street, 27411 Southfield Road, Jaybirds, they've received zoning permission for a covered canopy over their patio parking, or patio outdoor seating area. We are waiting for engineering documents, so an engineering review can be completed and they can be provided their permit. At 27651 Southfield Road, across the street, they received planning commission approval to expand their dining hall, and construction is underway and should be finished shortly. They did, as you can see here, the sign originally was right over the northern unit. It's now been centered to be over both of their suites. At 27700 Southfield Road, to the north, at the adaptive reuse of our historic school building, they received site plan extension in April from the Planning Commission, and they're still working with the Michigan State Housing Development Authority regarding project financing. At 28919 Southfield Road, they received site plan approval for a cafe. They have received zoning approval, and the engineering plans have been approved, and the building permits have been awarded. So that was just on Friday, so they should be beginning shortly. And there's another, this building, this unit is the one where the cafe is going in, and this one has been empty for over a decade, and there's a potential tenant. So fingers crossed they get a lease signed with the property owner.
Very good.
And that's all I got for you tonight.
Thank you. Austin, when did you start here?
I started in June of 2024.
June of 2024. So just as an FYI, and I know I've had this conversation casually with a few of the commissioners, my time on the Planning Commission basically overlaps your employment. I think we both entered the fray at about the same time. So 2 points to that timeline. One, for newer commissioners, I'm looking specifically at you, Commissioner Brewer, so much of the last, 6 months has been really dominated by master plan meeting. And I'm sure for a newer commissioner, if asked by an aunt or a cousin or whatever what they do with their time on the Planning Commission, that conversation would be dominated by master plan discussion, because that's what so much of our emphasis has been over the course of the last half year or so. I think I would answer that question differently. I think I would answer that question based on topics like site plan reviews and ordinance reviews, et cetera. So I'm just saying this as a kind of reminder to some of our newer commissioners. The master plan process, for as important and exciting as it is really kind of a every few year,
Every 5 to 6 years.
wrap back around obligation. The bulk of our job is more so focused on stuff like this, which seems like an afterthought to our last several meetings, but it really had dominated the majority of them otherwise. The other reason I ask about when you started is because you are stopping at the end of this month. So I believe when I joined, your predecessor had not yet vacated the office. She never presided over a meeting that I was part of, at least, but that transition happened right at the beginning of my time on the commission. So I don't know the Planning Commission without your guidance and without your agenda making and due diligence, et cetera. So on behalf of myself, and I'm sure everybody else, I would like to thank you for your time spent and hard work and many important contributions. And we wish you the best of luck in your next endeavors. So
Appreciate
thank you.
it. Thank you very much. It's been a pleasure working with all of you. And Tim, you've done a great job at taking over at chair. You've done a really good job. And I think you're leading the commission well. And yeah, the master plan process can be tedious and be a heavy lift, but you're almost through it. You've all really have embraced it, and you come prepared every month. We've added the study sessions. None of you complained about that. You've all shown up. So I just want to thank you all. You made it easy, and you all make it easy because of the hard work you're willing to put into it and coming prepared. So I want to thank you all, and I've enjoyed my time here. And yeah, the reason for leaving has nothing to do with Lathrup Village or anybody here or anything that's going on. It's just a personal life decision. So thank you guys, and yeah, I wish you all the best as well.
Yeah,
Wish you well.
thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we're almost done, but we'll move along to agenda item. Sorry, this agenda packet is about 300 pages long, so let me zoom all the way back up. Agenda item 9, public comment. Again, please state your name at the podium. And if Jonathan Terra is in the room, he will be public commenting. I know that.
So first of all, I want to say that I admire and will miss Austin's ability to move things along quickly, concisely, and completely.
Thank you.
Good luck in Chicago.
Appreciate it.
Make Chicago green for the right reasons.
Too.
Also, I want to say I'm encouraged by even though it's only a little over 50%, the median survey results, I think maybe people are coming around to maybe that's a good idea. And it kind of flows into my next thought, which is in 1924, Southfield Road was a dirt road, okay? And that gets us into the gem that I waited for. I didn't know it was coming toward the end of this meeting, hearing about Webster's thoughts and comments about converting or reverting. It's really converting much of the village center. Well, just the nose, but I'd like it to be much of the village center to housing. One little point I want to make is that I think this goes back much further, this aspirational idea of this village center, which can't work with a 50-mile-an-hour highway in the middle of it. It just can't. It can never work. It's not going to be a town center like we have a town center on the east side. Let's concentrate on that, okay? But if you go back to the original lots, the lots on El Dorado are 20 feet wide, like the lots on Southfield Road. The houses on El Dorado, for example, are built on multiple lots which have been combined. And that's the tax lot, is the combined 20, 46, 3 20-foot lots that a house is built on. In some cases, 4 or 5. I don't remember the exact, but I researched this because, by the way, a tree that was in the ditch finally came down today. That's on one of those city-owned 20-foot lots. But anyway, I really am glad to see maybe we'll have the opportunity to give more feedback at Town Hall with regard to, the interior of California Drive, which is actually still zoned commercial, okay? And all those houses are non-conforming. And yes, everyone who bought there, I suppose, should have known, should have looked at a zoning map and realized what they were buying. But I think most people didn't. But we need to reconsider that. And I thank also Commissioner Nordmo for following up on that and keep bringing it up. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, John Suzanis of Rainbow Drive again. Last 3 minutes of your meeting, or roughly. I want to start out by saying I really enjoyed the work that's been coming out of this commission, the discussions of late. I think the process has been hard to manage, and I like the ideas and the sort of focus that has emerged in the last couple of meetings. I don't understand why the presentations have not been provided in the packets. They'd be easier to follow along. They would provide us with prior knowledge of what was going to be discussed, and they would allow people to look up the packets after the meeting. And I really, I know that was requested early in this process, didn't happen, and I wish that it had. Another thing, looking backwards, and I'm sorry, but maybe this will be useful for the future master planning sessions. I really think that the Planning Commission should have been involved directly with the survey construction. So many of your questions about the survey data stem from sort of imperfect questions, and I know that I don't think that was an opportunity given to you, but I think it was a missed opportunity nonetheless. I think a lot more could have been gleaned from the data had you guys provided your insights ahead of time into how that survey could be constructed. There's things, for instance, asking about different housing types on the corridor specifically will get you different answers than if you just ask generally about, apartments and duplexes, et cetera. There were other questions that you guys pointed out. Just as an aside, when you're presenting data on a mean, on an average like that, one helpful thing to do is show what the mode was, what was the most common response, and that can help you understand what a 2.5 actually means. Is it a bunch of fives and a bunch of zeros, or is it 100% 2.5? So that's something that we could maybe see a little more data with context provided. The other thing I want to talk about that you guys mentioned, community character. The thing I think where that might come out is there's an interaction between the city, the downtown, the development areas, and the residents that I think community character might cover. For instance, bright lights that shine all night long. That's a development thing, but it's also part of our community character. Restaurants that are open past 11, past 10, what do we want for community character? That it's an interaction between the residents living here and the kind of businesses that we have. So I thought that was important. I love the idea about wider sidewalks in the corridor to accommodate both bikes and cities. And then if I could just have your leeway for one last thing. I thought that perhaps a way to organize the master plan rather than the 4 categories you had would be the corridors, the residential areas, and the parks and rec. Because it feels like the ideas that you guys are talking about are gravitating around those areas as opposed to the areas that this particular plan was shown at. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? All right, I'll close public comment. Moving along to commissioner comments. Anything from the dais? I'll say briefly, these meetings have been long. I think we've been doing a really good job of contributing in them, and I'm confident that the master plan that comes out of this process is going to be a hell of a lot less general and kind of city agnostic, and at minimum be a lot more in the flavor of Lathrup Village, and that makes me feel proud of the progress we've made in that way. I think looking forward, assuming the group of us or any of us at all are still on this planning commission for the next time around, we ought to be, look, I don't think any of us were positioned to be this way this time, but I think on a go forward, how can the planning commission be more involved we're involved in the lessons, but we're not really involved in the curriculum or the structure of how the master plan update goes. So perhaps future iterations of the planning commission could be more involved at all stages of the process. But that's for the future, onward, I guess. Any other commissioner comments?
Appreciate your work too very much.
Oh, thank you, Dennis. I appreciate that. I appreciate you guys. One more commissioner comment to Mr. Suzanis' first point at the first public comment. This commission used to have this predates any of you except Dennis. We used to have an unexcused absence problem. And so we went to the rule book to figure out how to strengthen those rules to ensure that people providing no notice of their absences were not sticking around on the commission by way of their nonfeasance is the technical term in those rules. We didn't at the time because I don't think the time necessitated it, give too much thought about commissioners who may be absent because they did provide notice or thereby their absences were excused by way of providing notice. So it might be a nice point of order for future meetings to go back to those rules and perhaps define better what happens if somebody has X number of unexcused absences. I'm sorry, excused absences, for example. So another future point.
And in the bylaws, there is a requirement that someone must attend, I think it's 2/3 of the meetings.
Okay.
Yeah, and if not, they can be removed by council.
Okay, very good. Would that come by recommendation? Who is the gatekeeper of that
It would,
rule?
I would monitor them, and then at the end of the year, the calendar year, take a look, and then that's when a recommendation would be given to council to have someone removed and replaced.
Okay, I appreciate that. Any other comments? Very good. I'll take a motion to adjourn, please.
So moved.
Second.
The motion has been made and seconded. All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Hearing none, we're adjourned. Thank you.